Welcome to the Alchemy for Authors podcast. I'm your host, Jo Bueller. If you're an author, aspiring author, writer, or wordsmith, you're in the right place. Join me every week as I chat with authors and industry professionals and share my own experiences about using manifestation and mindset practices to supercharge our writing lives. We'll explore ways to overcome writer's block and imposter syndrome. We'll find motivation and inspiration to get our butts in the chair and our stories written. And most importantly, we'll embark on creating lives and livings doing what we love. If you've ever dreamt of a prolific, wealthy, happy or healthy author career or writing practice, then this show is for you. So let's dive into Alchemy for Authors. Welcome back to Alchemy for Authors. Today I'm interviewing the wonderful author and podcaster, Jackie Amsden from These Mums Write. We'll be talking about Jackie's background in modelling and how this, for a time, drove and impacted upon her writing her first novel. We'll also discuss the human need to feel special, to be seen, and how using manifestation, getting in alignment with your goals, and taking action can move you closer to your goals. So grab a hot drink and find a comfy chair, sit back and enjoy the show. Well, hello, my lovelies, and welcome back to the show. So today I want to introduce to you the wonderful Jackie Amsden. So Jackie is a mum and the author of a self-published YA mystery, The Tokyo Cover Girls. Her podcast, These Mums Write, supports mums to achieve their writing goals and dreams and launches in January 2022. And Jackie lives in the suburbs of Vancouver, Canada. So thank you so much, Jackie, for being here today.
Oh, thanks for having me today.
I'm so excited. I used to live in Canada, so that's really cool that you're in Vancouver. How's the weather there?
It's good. It's cold. Did you live in Whistler? Because there's a lot of people from your part of the world that go to Whistler.
No, I actually lived in Calgary, so in Alberta there. So yeah, I was there for several years. So
oh, really?
Yeah, but I've been to Vancouver, and Vancouver's lovely. I loved it. So
nice.
Yeah, that's really cool. So I know that you've got a really interesting story about your author journey to share with us. And I'm thinking that it actually plays quite heavily into mindset and taking action in that, which is kind of a big part of this podcast. But before we get into that, I would love if you could just start telling us a little bit about yourself and when you were first called to being an author.
Sure. When I was first, why I wanted to write?
Yeah,
that's a great question. I think, so when this goes back, a teenager, I really wanted to, I think ultimately it's be seen, right? I think a lot of teenage girls and boys, I'm sure, they just want to feel special. And so for me, I got it in my mind that I saw a newspaper article about a girl from my school who was a model in New York. And so that planted this seed in my mind that this was the way to be seen for me, is that I wanted to become a model. And if she could do it, then I could. And so I enrolled in modeling school,
oh my gosh,
which is kind of comical now, but because it was held in this ballet studio on the weekends, it wasn't exactly, going to a big name modeling school downtown or anything. It was in the suburbs, but I really wanted it. And, eventually it wasn't really through my modeling school experience. It was just that I happened to grow tall enough to be a model. And so my mom, took me to see agents, and this agent that I saw was like, yeah, just lose 20 pounds and come back. And grow 2 inches. That's actually the chronology. And so then I did grow 2 inches. And so then I started to diet. And so eventually got an agent and started that journey. And, and I think back on it now, it's definitely because I wanted to, feel special. And I think models are really revered, especially in that age category, is this pinnacle of exclusivity and specialness. And so I was just really excited and, wound up going to Japan when I was 15 and living there And that started like a journey for me of this having this other life, right? So, I would go back to school after, often the trips were in the summer. So you'd get like a 2 month, that was like your standard visa for Asia. So I'd get this, I'd have this, this big experience. And I was like, oh my God, I'm like with all these cool people and I'm so special. Right. And, but at the same time, I was dieting that whole time, right? Because, and I don't want to paint this as all market models experience, because I definitely had girls that took it less seriously than me, but I was really, it was like this core part of my identity. And so I did really, restrict myself. And I thought, well, that's the price that I pay to feel special. And so I did that for a few years. And then eventually, though, just, that starvation mode was too much for me to bear. And I just quit. And I think that experience also for me was really like, the thing about modeling is that it's very passive, right? So you aren't really expressing yourself in any way. In fact, a little bit. I mean, you could say there's some acting involved when you're like posing in front of the camera. But I think the thing that like made me also want to quit is I finally got there and I was a little, it's not really fulfilling in the same way I think that some of the arts might be, maybe if you're an actor or whatever, because you're just really like standing there and smiling for most of the time. So, but I had this big experience and I left it behind because, it was just too much of a cost. And then I went on with my life and did, nonprofit work and university and all of those more traditional pieces. But I always felt like, oh, this was really interesting and not a lot of people talk about it. So, the Tokyo fashion industry, there's like a lot of girls that go there from all over the world, like Canada, United States, England, Australia, New Zealand, right? But I'm not seeing this very much. So I got into my mind that, oh, this is something, again, that's specialness, right? Like, this is my special story. I'm going to be the one to tell it. And all these girls are just going to love it because, I watched America's Next Top Model. And if they like that, then they'll love this. So I spent then, I don't know how long it took me. The thing is, I did a graduate degree and I felt like after university, I really had to like unlearn how to write. So that it took me a long time, right?
Yeah.
To learn how to write in a way that's like emotive and isn't an argument.
Absolutely. It's very different, isn't it? Yeah.
It's very different. And so, and I only bring that up because I put a lot of time into writing this book, which I thought was going to be like so amazing because, I felt like it was so unique, the topic but I couldn't get anyone to, like, I couldn't get an agent for it. Well, I had a long story there, but I won't go into that, but I didn't have an agent for it and I didn't get a publisher. And so, and then after many embarrassing like rejections, I just decided to self-publish it. And so like, you can see like how much it was tied up in that, right? Like it was like this identity I had as a teenager and then still feeling like, well, it's special. I'm special because I did that. And I'm going to write a novel that is like exposing that experience and the people will see me as special. But one of the challenges was that, I couldn't get into that exclusive club of publishing, right? Which was like, and again, like when I was a model, like that was such a source of pride. Like we are the ones that have agents, Yeah. And so for writing, I couldn't get into the club. And so I self-published it. And the experience, it wasn't bad. Like I did some, workshops at libraries and at a launch party at my literary organization and stuff like that. But it wasn't like, just didn't feel like very many people cared or read it besides like the few that I just had to really hustle to get in front of, right?
Yeah.
Right. I think it's when you don't feel like anyone else has invested in your writing, it can be really hard to keep believing in it. And so I didn't. I was like, you know what? I guess it wasn't an important story after all. And I'm just gonna
Oh,
I just like walked away from it at a certain point. And I just felt like the whole writing enterprise was just too much and the wall was too high to climb, which is funny again, because like you could say that about modeling, but I didn't let that stop
yeah.
me.
It's
And maybe
so
it's, yeah.
it's so interesting. I think so many beginner authors go through exactly what you've been through, in that we're expecting, we put so much of our identity into that first book, and
Yeah.
we're expecting people to be as equally invested as we are. And then it's that real shock and that coming down to earth, that they're not. Like that. It almost robs us of something because we just have such high expectations for that first book. It's really tough. It's a tough thing to kind of go through. So how did you move on from that? What was your next thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So again, I think a lot of this for me is really tied to like having that modeling experience at such a young age. It really like it made it so that it was like this core part of my identity. Like my sense of worth was right tied into like, oh yeah, and I used to be a model. Yeah, that's cool. Right. I know I'm with the DJ. But and so I thought, and I had this really like sort of earth-shattering comment actually from someone in my writers group. She was like a younger woman, and she said, oh, well, she was like lamenting about her life. And I was like, hey, don't worry about it. You know, you can still do lots of cool stuff. And she's like, you're just saying that you've already done your cool stuff. You were a model. And I was like, oh my God, is that it? is that all I'm going to have? But I did feel that way. I felt like after I wrote that book, that's all I had to say. That was all that was special about me. And it obviously wasn't that special because it didn't go very far, right? And then what happened was that I really like thrifting. And so I downloaded this app for thrifting, Poshmark, where you sell clothes from your closet.
Yeah.
And so I just started writing actually in the Poshmark app listings for my clothes, but then they just weren't listings at all. They just turned into like these stories that I was writing, just like comedy, just very silly like stories. But I was really developing this voice through the process of like, I guess it's tendencies of me, but looking at my world, you know, motherhood, living in suburbia, wanting to find your purpose, being middle aged, and like the weird things that your body starts to do that, you know, no one ever prepared you for. So all those things that were just like my everyday, and finding like that I did have something to write about. And, you know, and some people really liked them. Some people were like, what's happening here? I just was looking at this skirt. But I think the encouragement, though, that I did get from that audience made me realize that, oh, you know what? I do have something else to say. And it's not about modeling. I can now like move beyond that. And that's what I'm writing about now. And so it was really, I think, getting that validation that people
that's
thought,
cool.
yeah,
That's really cool. So did you know when you were writing these like adverts and that for your clothes that this was leading you towards something bigger, or were you just kind of doing it for fun? You didn't realize that this was going to be part of your writing journey?
Yeah, it was just fun. It was just, you know, like the apps dimensions. I was just like, this is just, you know, I just wanted to play with it. I just was enjoying playing with it. Like I could write about like 100% cotton and like the dimensions, but that's boring. Like I want to tell you a story about this skirt. And then I just kind of like moved from there. So I think just really enjoying playing with the
That's
writing.
cool. And so now you're working on another book, is that right?
Yeah, working on a comedy, which is, yeah, very much about those things, like a woman trying to find alignment after being out of the workforce for, you know, a long time to take care of her kids, but not really identifying with the mother identity. That's something I've always struggled with too, is I'm like, ooh, mother. I'm just me. I'm not this person that has a stroller and all those bags full of things. So it's kind of identifying some of the double standards that we have for women and for mothers and for people who have, are trying to find their sense of purpose, and just plays on that. Because, throughout all of this, that's, having a professional life has also been like a part of my experience, like, having a job and earning an income. So it's playing with those tensions.
Yeah. So just going backwards a little bit. So when you put your book, The Tokyo Cover Girls, out, and then you didn't get this amazing reception that you were expecting. And so how long did you kind of step away from writing for after that? Like, I think you'd mentioned to me previously anyway, that there was a good few years before you even kind of got back into writing. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it was 5 years. I didn't, 5 years. Like, because I remember, because my daughter was born, like I have pictures of like me holding up the book and like holding up my baby, together. And, of course, motherhood presents many demands on time. So after, like, I spent my year of mat leave just like focused on marketing. So I, did blog tours and, like I said, like going to libraries and doing like workshops with youth and just lots of different attempts at marketing. But like, looking back now, I know I did the whole thing wrong. So it, it was like an upward battle. And so of course I wasn't seeing very much like return on my time investment. So that whole piece of the writing experience was just so overwhelming that like people were saying, yeah, you need to have like 10 books before you can, do, so they can do these free giveaways. And it's like, oh my God, are you kidding me? Like it took me like 10 years to write this book. Like, so I just gave up. All of that was just too much, combined with like never feeling validated with my writing, by the important authorities, bloggers, sure. But there's a, I think sense for myself that wasn't enough. So I just was like, yep, I'm done. Forget it. And I just focused on like, moving ahead with my professional, day job. And just didn't write, and I just couldn't. Like I tried to start a few projects here and there, but it just always felt like work. And then I was like, it was like with the first one, I was like really excited about it because I felt like there was purpose, right? Like I was sharing this world. I was, I had been to Tokyo. I wanted to make a difference with this book, in a fun, entertaining way, but I couldn't find that for a long time. So it wasn't really until I found that voice of like making fun of like what it means to be a middle-aged woman that I got that spark again of like, oh yes, this is something we need to talk about.
Cool. So what do you think's changed then? So other than like getting your spark back for writing this book, what do you think's changed again for you because writing a book takes a lot of energy and a lot of time. And after your initial like feeling of that kind of overwhelm and not getting the reception you needed, how are things changed for you now that you're willing to invest that time and that energy again in another book? What's changed?
That's a good question. I think a couple of things. So I think stumbling into, the world of manifestation and alignment and like hearing those terms, right? It's like, oh, before I went from like, I'm just here and I was like, I had this mindset that I just need to get through this tunnel. And then at the end of all this hard labor, then I will be like at the lake, whatever, the magical gold mountain. And then when I got there, I was like, oh, I'm not here at all. That tunnel was horrible. I don't want to go back in there. But I think hearing and learning about like the ideas of manifesting what you want to create in the world and taking risks and investing financially so that you are forced to take those steps forward and like finding those blocks inside you and leaning into them. All of that has meant opening myself up in ways that I had never even considered. And so reaching out to writers to build a community and asking them how they do things. And like the idea of, the podcast, which is talking to moms about all aspects of the writing process. I'm learning along the way, but it's also, it's going into that unknown And so, writing can be very, solitary, right?
Yeah,
But that's, I don't think, and I was so focused just like on the book, right? Like I had my writing group and they would, give me feedback because of course, I did know that's an essential part of the process, but I wasn't thinking bigger than that, right? And I think now that that's what this language has done for me is like opening up myself to something much bigger. Like, and I don't know exactly what the answer is, but I know that reaching out to people through a podcast or taking a course or joining a Facebook group and commenting and all of that stuff is important and like is helping me see beyond what I could have seen before. And so that I can see more possibilities than what was there before. And I think so that you don't get to that point at the end where you're like, and I'm done. Okay. Magic. It's like, no, I can create, right? I got to create the magic now. I got to do it every step along the way. I can't, and I don't want to, and I'm learning so much, but yeah, I think that's really is that opening up. And so it felt like the opposite. It feels like the opposite of how I was approaching things before.
That is so cool. I really see writing a book like a journey too. And the more we can open ourselves up to connecting with other authors and that it's just amazing how the universe kind of aligns for us. And we end up with just a little bit more success with actually getting our book out there. So that there's something to be said for a good old networking and social media and chatting with other people doing the work and everything as well. It really does open amazing doors. Like this, really, like sitting here chatting with you on the other side of the world right now. That's really cool. Can you talk a little bit more about what some of your like manifestation practices? Is it just your like mindset, or do you do affirmations, or have a set routine that you do with your writing, or what are some of those things that you do for your writing?
Think like one big insight was just changing that idea of finding time to realize like, oh, I can create time. I was always thinking it had to be done this way. And I just realized like, oh, I could do it. Like, so now I get up really early, like at 5 and do writing then, because I could never get it at the end of the day. It was just never happened for me. And so I got into that like mindset, fixed mind mindset where I was like, well, I guess I just can't do that. I'm not one of those people, right?
Yeah, I hear you.
And then when I realized, oh, no, I am. I just have to do it in the morning. So a simple shift. I started doing meditation. So I read one of the books that really like got me started on this path was Jen Sincero's You Are a Badass.
Oh,
book,
cool.
Which, I just stumbled upon it at Valley Village. Like I said, I love thrifting and I never would have found it, but I was like, oh, that's cool. I like badass. That sounds funny. Yeah, so awesome. I read it and she talks about like waking up from the big sleep. And I was like, I am asleep. That is me. Like, my life is good, but like, am I really fully showing up? What life do I want to have? And I thought, well, yeah, of course I would want to be writing more, but is that all I would want to do? Like, so she talks about like how one of her visions for her life. So she said, I want to help people. I want to leave the house so that I can put on, the things and not be at home all day. And I want to be able to travel. I think those were her criteria of the life she wanted to manifest when she really like dug into coaching. Cool. And so I was like, oh, what would I want? And it is writing, but it's also not just that. Because that year that I just did marketing for my book, like, I was like, oh my God, this is horrible. Like, I'm just like here all alone. And that's not how I want to be. Like, I can't just do that. So I thought, oh, well, I want to talk to people. So it could be like teaching and then it's some kind of interaction thing, right? Like she said, you can be like pretty general, right? But something where I'm helping people and like interacting with them, like telling stories. And so I did that, got that into my head. And, as things will happen, I was thinking, oh, Jen's cool. Like, I wonder if she has a podcast. And so I was searching her. And I don't know why this happens, but if you search Jen Sincero on Apple Podcasts, Kathy's comes up. And I don't know because they're friends. I don't know how it works. And so I wound up, right, like one step more, like that, just applying that curiosity, like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, right. Like I want to learn more about Jen, and then, oh, I want to put Kathy. Oh, and then just at that time, Kathy, she was advertising the podcasting course in her episodes, right? So then you're like, oh, what's that? And so I felt like just like that opening up, right? Suddenly all these possibilities became like open to me and visible. And, now I'm like, oh yeah, now that I'm launching this podcast to help other moms that are grappling with the same things I did, I'm like, oh, this is like fulfilling that thing that I said back when I was reading You Are a Badass, which is about like having a interactive component of your like ideal life where you're working with people, sharing their stories, helping people learn all of those pieces. So again, it's just taking one step, and I think not thinking too much about the outcome. And I'm still on the journey, but it is exciting to see new things that you wouldn't have seen before.
Absolutely. Gosh, I love so much about that. So just for our listeners, Kathy is Kathy Heller with her Don't Keep Your Day Job podcast, which highly recommend. But yeah, there's so much to kind of pick apart from what you were just saying. Like, I absolutely agree that kind of holistic view, like, no matter how much you're passionate about writing, it can't be your everything. It just can't. Like, so getting really clear on your why and why you're here and what you have to offer the world and what that looks like, because we all I've experienced this a lot. You burn out easily if you're just really tunnel visioned on writing a book or something like that. It's too early to kind of lose those connections with those other things that light you up in the world too. And from listening to what you're saying too, it's really clear too how the universe really kind of steps in, or the synchronicities come about when you kind of open yourself up to that path that kind of feels right for you. And so, finding that book, which I'm totally going to have to read now. I've written that down. We'll maybe put that in the show notes as well. And then finding these podcasts, and then growing this group of yours too with These Mums Write, and making those connections with other people going through the same kind of thing as you with the writing and that. It's such an amazing sign that you're on the right path and you're growing in that. So that's really exciting. I love seeing when those things happen. And what about so with your first book, you were really quite focused for a while on wanting the agent and wanting to be published, not the indie self-published route and that. How are you feeling about that now? Is that still the direction you're going in, or where are you?
It's a good question. I think now I'm just no, so I'm not so fixated on the outcome. And I think just but doing the work. So, taking the time to build community, right, and engage with your audience all throughout, so that you're not expecting someone to do that for you, and to enjoy that experience. So I think that's the problem with the literary agent and the publishing, right, is that there's so much gatekeeping there that if you don't, climb over, if you're not one of the ones that managed to climb over the wall, then you're just like, you're left on the ground and like smelly, and there's like puddles everywhere, and you're just like, this is what I work towards, right? Whereas, if we all reach out and support each other all along the way, and I really think that's the way, is that we will raise each other up as a community. And so I think it's definitely been a shift. I used to think right, like you just put good content out there, and that's actually what I see is just the people that show up and support each other are the ones that building their audience and building their community and moving towards their goals, their writing goals, which again, like, I think having that experience in the fashion industry, which it is very much like you fit into this criteria, like your waist better be 15 inches when I measure it tomorrow, Jackie, like this is a very specific criteria, right? Like, it's not about like what I have to say. It's about like, what's the dimensions today.
Yeah.
And so I think that's, it's been a real shift, like almost like the opposite.
Yeah, and that's so positive. I feel like we're just so lucky nowadays because we don't have to have those gatekeepers. Because I agree, like thinking of them as gatekeepers as far as the publishers and getting an agent and then being one of the few who doesn't already have a name brand or something out there being selected to have your books published through them. There are so many more avenues available for us out there to get our words out there, our voice out there. And indie or self-publishing is such a huge market at the moment, and you have so much autonomy over it. And I absolutely love indie publishing, so I'm kind of totally all for that. Just because there's no gatekeepers. It's just up to you putting your best work out there and doing the hard work and making those connections with other people and all of that. You don't need to be held back by the opinions of anybody else. So
Yeah.
And I think we're just so lucky that we have those opportunities to be able to do that. So
totally.
with your new book at the moment, what are the biggest challenges that you are finding? Because it sounds like, your whole mindset around this book is very, very different than your first one. But I'm assuming there's probably still some challenges. Like I know with writing any book, it's not necessarily an easy process. So what are you kind of struggling with a little bit at the moment?
Yeah, I think one thing is just finding places to get that critique and feedback. I left my writing group just because they're in Vancouver and I live in the suburbs now because I've got kids. And so it's definitely harder to find that time. So I need to like rethink how I do that. But I think connecting with these other writing mums and Facebook communities is like it'll come.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right, because I think you're laying all the foundations there that, I think you're right. It will kind of fall into place for you with that.
Yeah, just being open. And but that is one thing I do miss is, it's hard to find the time for all of that. But I always loved that the most. It would be, you get such great feedback, and that was such a fun part of writing. Yeah. And I think that's probably, when I write now, I do feel like, because I did try some projects and they just didn't really go anywhere. I think this one feels like it's like in alignment for me because I definitely write by the seat of my pants, as they say. But I just feel like I know the path forward. I can see it more clearly now. Not to say I don't ever make any mistakes or anything, but I feel like overall, like it's much clearer for me.
That's cool. That's exciting. So you've got a lot coming up really for you now because you've got your podcast and that releases in January.
Yeah.
And then you've also got this book too. When are you, like, do you have a kind of timeline in mind, or are you just going with the flow? Like this book will take as long as it takes to be written, or did you have an idea?
That's a good question. I should put a date on it, but I haven't.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tend to try and put dates on my books, but I don't always meet those dates. So I totally understand. Sometimes life just happens, and sometimes a book's just going to take as long as a book's going to take to be written. So
but I like that idea. I think I will after this, like, think about that end date, and I do, like I said, I identify as a pantser, but one thing I have also learned from doing interviews is like it doesn't have to be one or the other, and so. That's another thing I want to do more at this time is now set some time aside to do some of the planning, and so that I know like roughly where I'm headed, and then like you said, like how long it'll take me to get there. Because one thing I don't have that I did have when I was writing the other one was like the gift of just like unending days stretches of time.
It changes a lot, I think, when you're a mum as well, and you've got all these other things going on. So that's got to be really tough. Well, I'm just wondering then if you've got any last kind of words of wisdom or anything that you would like to share with our audience and anybody that might find themselves in a similar situation as you were, where maybe they've written a book and then took a really long hiatus from it for various reasons and are getting back into starting a new project. Any advice or words of wisdom?
Yeah, I think for me it really came down to voice and realizing, like, getting to know mine. So when I started to write this, I just was writing like stream of consciousness for like a long time. And that's because I was just really enjoying the voice. And I realized that's something that is what is really fueling it, is figuring out what is my voice. And that, gets me excited, because that, I think we all want to feel like we're creating something that's special and unique. And the more that we can lean into what is special and unique about us, that is what is going to get us excited about the work. And that's really, for me, how it changed from some of the projects where I just, this is okay, but it just felt kind of like work, to like, oh, this is that feeling I had. Because with that first one, I did have that feeling. Like, I was excited about it because I felt like it was special. And so now, even though I'm not writing about Tokyo, I'm like, oh, I found that excitement again. And that's what is driving this forward.
Oh, I love it. Just totally love that, and totally agree. Finding your voice just puts you on your path again. It's fantastic. And where can my audience connect with you then? Because like I said, you've got a few different projects going on really with this podcast and everything. So how can they follow what you're doing and connect with you?
Yeah, I think the best things would be on if they're interested in being part of the Writing Mom community, they could search on Facebook, These Moms Write. And if they're just interested in more, the writing, or they're not quite ready to join a Facebook group, just check me out on Instagram. That is Jackie Amsden. And I would love to see them in either of those places.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to put all those in the show notes too, so that people can follow you and connect with you. And yeah, thank you so much. It's been such a blast chatting with you.
Oh, it's been great. Thank you so much, Jo.
Today's takeaways. Number 1, consider what makes you special and how you can use this to fuel your writing. Number 2, don't find time, create time. Number 3, ask yourself, am I showing up? What life do I want for myself? And is writing all I want to do, or is there more? Number 4, get to know your writing voice. Write what makes you excited. Number 5, spend the time now building community and engaging with your audience. And number 6, follow the breadcrumbs of curiosity. Just take one step and don't think too much about the outcome. Don't get lost in that. So thank you so much for listening to this episode today. You can find show notes, links to resources and other goodies at my website, jobuer.com. And while you're there, you can also pick up a free copy of my short story collection, Between the Shadows. If you've enjoyed this episode, I'd be extremely grateful if you could subscribe, rate and review, and share this episode with others. Until next time, happy writing.